And let me introduce shortly Professor Dina Porat, who will chair the next panel. It is not so polite that a former student introduces his teacher, and that is my case. But as the Talmudic sentence says, patur belo klum I efshar. So let me mention that Professor Dina Porat has served as the head of the Tel Aviv University School of Jewish Studies, the Jewish History Department, the Stefan Roth Institute for the Study of Contemporary Antisemitism and Racism, and she had a Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry, and from 2011, she was appointed the chief historian of Yad Vashem. Everyone here I know knows the work of Professor Porat. Let me also mention that she was named outstanding lecturer at Tel Aviv University. She was awarded the Raoul Wallenberg Centennial Medal in 2012. She has been named by the Marker as one of the Israelis' 50 sharpest minds, and by Forbes as one of the 50 most influential women in Israel. She's the author of Beyond the Corporal, The Life and Times of Abba Kovner, which was awarded the Zandman Prize by the International Organization of Fighters, Partisans and Camp Prisoners, and the Buchman Prize by Yad Vashem. קפה הבוקר ברוח השם, נפגשם של היישוב והחברה הישראלית עם השואה וניצוליה, which was awarded the Agit Prize in 2011, and לינה קם ושילם, היישוב, השואה וקבוצת הנוקמים של אבא קוטנר, that was a recipient of the very prestigious Bahat Prize, and will appear shortly with Stanford University Press under the name Vengeance and Retribution Are Mine, Community, the Holocaust, Abba Kovner's Avengers, that will appear shortly by Stanford, and if I remember good, it will appear also in German. So, Dina, bevakasha.
Thank you, Marcos. Thank you everyone. Thank you, the organizers. And not only the organizers, I'd like very much to thank you, Marcus, and especially the whole editorial of Yalkut Moreshet, and you and Graciela, and the excellent work that you did together to put up this important volume. Little did we know when we started thinking about it. We thought about Eastern Galicia, 1944, 8 years after Operation Barbarossa. Little did we know how relevant this work will be for the days we are now witnessing in the Ukraine and in general. So thank you everyone. And a final word of introduction. Graciela kindly mentioned the Alfred P. Slaner chair. The chair is honored to support the Yalkut Moreshet for many years now, and hope it will go on for many years to go. So we'll start after Marcos' very generous introduction. We will start the next second session. We have two speakers, each of them has 20 minutes, and then we have concluding remarks. The two lectures will be given first by Professor Grzegorz Rossolinski-Liebe. I'll introduce him in a minute, and then by Professor Per Anders Rudling. And the concluding remarks will be given by Professor Shimon Redlich, also known to us all for his work here. So the first is Professor Grzegorz Rossolinski-Liebe. He's an historian at the Freie Universität Berlin and a lecturer at the Zentrum für Antisemitismusforschung. He specializes in the history of the Holocaust, fascism, anti-Semitism, and which is interesting to even more to our conference is in his interest in multi-ethnic cities. I will not name all the funds and the Stiftungs that he was honored by. It's a long list and a very respected one. He published the first scholarly biography of Stepan Bandera. Stepan Bandera, The Life and Afterlife of a Ukrainian nationalist, Fascism, Genocide and Cult, 2014, which is of course of utmost importance to what we are talking about, wrote articles, edited volumes about anti-Semitism at Central Tel Aviv universities. So all in all, we are honored to have him, and please, the floor is yours for the next 20 minutes.
Thank you, Dina, for this kind introduction. Thank you, Graciela, for this wonderful volume about Galicia. I think I will need less than 20 minutes. As every article, my article has a history, and I would like to start with this history. And the history starts actually with the publication of my biography of Stepan Bandera. As I was going to publish the biography, I was attacked by Ukrainian and also by German historian. I went to Ukraine in 2012 and wanted to present my Bandera biography. It was the manuscript at the time in 3 cities. It was not possible. Lviv didn't want, and I think it was Donetsk didn't want. It was possible to publish only in the German embassy in Kiev. And after the biography was published in 2012, this is the biography. In the meantime, it was translated into Polish, and it was translated into Ukrainian. This is the Ukrainian translation of the biography, and into Russian. The Ukrainian and Russian translation were published in 2021, but they are announced only in 2022, shortly before the war, because the publisher didn't want to do it before because he was afraid that the government would intervene, and he wanted to make sure that the copies are already in the bookstores. So as it was published, the English version in 2014, I was attacked by the Ukrainian and also by the German historian, and I wondered why I'm attacked for this book, and I started to think about what the historian missed or didn't understand in the Bandera biography. So why did they attack the book? What did they miss in their studies about the Holocaust in Western Ukraine, and why did they think that there is something wrong with the Bandera biography? And it was the same time, 2012, 2013, 2014, when Laura Jokusz published his important study about the Jewish survivor historians. And it was also the time when I discovered Zau Friedlander's concept of integrated history. I assume you are familiar with this concept. And also reading Zau Friedlander, I came across his critique of the German-centered historiography. And yeah, it was all the things applied also to the historiography of the Holocaust in Galicia, not only the stride between Moreshet and Friedlander in the 80s in the 90s, but actually the German-centered historiography is present in all the books the German historians published in the 1990s and even after the millennium. So I wrote the article first in German. It was Stefanie Schiller-Springorum. Stefanie Schiller-Springorum is the director of the Center for Antisemitism Studies, Zentrum für Antisemitismusforschung, and she published this article in German in this volume in 2016. So Gedächtnis und Gewalt. Then I presented the translation or extended version of this article at the conference in St. Louis. It was the Lessons and Legacies conference. And I remember Omar Bartov was at the presentation, Jan Grosswet was at the presentation, and the panel was, the head of the panel was Jan Grabowski, and we had a discussion. And I think Omar said, Grzegorz, make an article for this. It was already in German, but make this article from this piece and publish this in English. And then, interesting, I submitted this to two journals. I think it was a Journal of Contemporary History and Journal of Holocaust Studies, and both journals rejected this article. So they claimed the main argument was, I am too critical about the German historians, and they didn't want to publish this article. So what is the article? What is the article about? The research question is how anti-communist Soviet, German, Jewish, Polish, and Ukrainian historians understood and depicted the Ukrainian nationalists and the Jews during the Holocaust. So first part is what happened in first part of the article is what happened in Ukraine during World War II and were the Ukrainians involved in the Holocaust. And we can talk to explain this about at least three stages of the Holocaust in Galicia. So the first stage would be 1941 and the pogroms Kai Struve talked about, and the ghettoization of the Jews in 1941. Then we have the systematic killing of the Jews in 1942 and the beginning of 1943. So half of the Jews in Eastern Galicia is shot, and the other half is deported to the Moreshet camp and killed them. And in Volhynia, which I count also to Western Ukraine, all the Jews were shot. And then we have the last stage of the Holocaust, 1943, 1944, after the Aktion Reinhardt and the dissolution of the ghettos. This is the stage in which the Ukrainian nationalists, ordinary Ukrainians, and the Germans are hunting for the Jews. So who are the Ukrainian perpetrators in these three stages? In the first stage, the pogroms, it were the OUN, Ukrainian militia, and German occupiers. In the second stage, it were the German police, administration, as well as the Ukrainian police and Ukrainian administration. And in the third stage, UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, OUN, and the Germans. And Ukrainian nationalists participated in all three stages. Very important, they participated in the second stage when most of the Ukrainian Jews were killed as Ukrainian policemen. So the Ukrainian nationalists from the OUN joined the Ukrainian police, and they helped the Germans to kill the Jews, and they were realizing actually their own goal, because they wanted to have an ethnic country, and collaborating with the Germans in the police, they could realize this aim. And in 1943, 1944, also very important, Oma mentioned this, there was an ethnic cleansing of the Polish population, first in Volhynia and then in Eastern Galicia in 1944. And in this ethnic cleansing, the UPA, the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, killed between 70 and 100,000 Poles and was also hunting for the Jews who escaped from the ghettos. What is really important to emphasize when we talk about the Holocaust and the Ukrainian nationalists in Western Ukraine is to say that they were involved in the murder of 800,000 Jews. So they were involved in the murder of all the Jews who lived in Eastern Galicia and Volhynia. We have 450,000 Jews in Eastern Galicia and 250,000 Jews in Volhynia, and Ukrainian nationalists, ordinary Ukrainians in the administration, are involved in the annihilation of all these Jews, not only in 1 or 2%, as some apologists claim, but in the annihilation of all these Jews. So the second part of the article is the historiography. So how the Soviet historian, how the Polish historian, how the German historian, Jewish historians depicted the Holocaust in Galicia, and what were they interested in, what they left, what they didn't touch. So first, Jewish historians, these were people like Philip Friedman, Aharon Weiss, Shmuel Spector, Eliyahu Yones. These were Holocaust survivors and historians. Some of them were historians already before the war, like Philip Friedman. He was a professional historian before the war. Others became historians after the war, and they were analyzing and researching what they actually went through. And they presented the Holocaust either in a very multi-phase way. So they concentrated on the German perpetrators, but they also included the Ukrainian collaboration, and they wrote a lot about the Jewish collaboration, the Judenräte, and actually they presented a very integrated picture of history. The second group of historians or historiography which I analyzed is the anti-Soviet and anti-communist historiography, And I explained this on the example of John Armstrong. He was a military historian, an American military historian, and he published the first scholarly monograph on the OUN and UPA, the Ukrainian nationalists, and he did it in the early 1950s. And he very much paved the way of how historians, after his publication, understood the Ukrainian nationalists during the Holocaust, and he did it in a problematic way. So what he did, he interviewed. He had a limited access to documents. He used many German documents which were available at this time. He had some access to Ukrainian documents. He completely left out the Jewish accounts. So he didn't interview Holocaust survivors. He ignored the publications by Friedman and other Jewish historians. And what he did, he was interviewing Ukrainian nationalists. So actually the Ukrainian perpetrators. He interviewed them, and then he didn't really analyze, but took for granted what they told him. And it is the core of his study. And obviously we find only not much about the Holocaust and about the violence of the OUN, UPA, and Ukrainian nationalists and the Ukrainian police. There is 1 or 2 sentences about the Holocaust, and there is 1 or 2 sentences in his monograph about the ethnic cleansing of the Poles. So a very problematic study, but the first scholarly study about the OUN and the Ukrainian nationalists during World War II and during the Holocaust, published in the early 1950s. And it was regarded as a standard monograph on the Ukrainian nationalists and in the Holocaust until the 1990s or even later. So we find even today historians who would say that it is a very important study. Then the next group which I analyzed were the Ukrainian historians, and there are at least 2 groups: the diaspora historians who publish after the war, and the contemporary historians today in Ukraine. And this is very interesting because we have some of the main Ukrainian Holocaust perpetrators, like Mykola Lebed, who was for some time the leader of the OUN. So he was very much involved in the Holocaust and very much involved in the ethnic cleansing of the Poles. He published in 1946 a short monograph about the UPA in Rome, and he obviously denied the violence of the UPA and depicted the UPA as heroes and anti-Soviet fighters. The Ukrainian diaspora historians emphasized very much the suffering of the Ukrainians. They claimed that the Holocaust was a German event, so it were only the German perpetrators who were killing Jews. In 1961, Petro Mirchuk, who was also a veteran of the OUN, published the first biography of Stepan Bandera. And the critical dealing with the Ukrainian history by the diaspora historian or by Ukrainian historian began in the 1990s. So it were people like John Paul Himka or Marko Tsarennik who first started to look in a critical way at the OUN and the UPA and the Ukrainian nationalists and the Holocaust, and published the first critical studies about the subjects. Today in Ukraine we have 2 groups of historians. One group are people like Volodymyr Wiatrovich, who denies the participation of the OUN UPA in the Holocaust, and another group are historians who study the ideology but not the violence. This would be people like Zaitsev. And we have young critical historians like Mata Havryshko, who is interested in the sexual violence, or Yuri Radchenko. Then next group is the Soviet historiography. It is very much about the suffering of the Soviet people. They didn't really mention Jews or Poles as the victims of the Ukrainian nationalists, because the concept of ethnicity was not present in the Soviet historiography. They were writing about the Soviet people as the victims, and they described first the Ukrainian nationalists, the German Ukrainian nationalists. So the concept was to present the Ukrainian nationalists as people who are continuing the Nazi policy after the Nazi Germany was defeated. And then they called the Ukrainian nationalists bourgeois nationalists, and it was the context of the Cold War. And as you know, the Ukrainian nationalists, the UPA, fought until the early 1950s. Next group are the Polish historians. Polish historians, this is also very interesting. They concentrate very much on the killing of the Poles by the UPA and the anti-Soviet struggle of the UPA. And they are not really interested in studying the Holocaust and in the fascism of the OUN. So the ethnic cleansing in Galicia, in Volhynia and Eastern Galicia is an important part of the studies. The struggle, anti-Soviet fight is also an important part, but Holocaust and fascism are not really present in the Polish historiography. What is also interesting about the Polish historiography is that the left-wing historians in Poland actually deny or are silent about the crimes of the Ukrainian nationalists, and it are the nationalist historians who study the OUN and UPA. And last group I want to talk about, and is depicted in the analyzing the article, are the German historians. I called it between Nationalsozialismusforschung and Osteuropa-Forschung. In the 1990s, German historians conducted very good research on the Holocaust in Western Ukraine, in Galicia and Volhynia too, but it was limited to the German perpetrators. The behavior of Ukrainian nationalists and ordinary Ukrainians was completely absent, or maybe not completely, but it was absent in this publication. And the Ukrainian nationalists, the administration, and ordinary Ukrainians were not really involved in this publication. So when one reads this book from the 1990s about the Holocaust in Western Ukraine, written by German historians, he is very well informed about how the German perpetrators killed the Jews, but he's confused if the Ukrainian nationalists and the ordinary Ukrainians participated in the Holocaust. They are mentioned, but only at the edge, and the reader does not really know in which way and how were they involved. And three important reasons for this selective writing were methodology, so the concentration on the German documents, not dealing with the survivor testimonies, the interest in the German perpetrators and the German history, and German historians also wanted to avoid blaming other people. So they didn't want to blame the Ukrainians for the murder conducted by the Germans, and the Germans were the main perpetrators of the Holocaust in Western Ukraine. And the article ends with an inter-ethnic and a transnational historiography, so a new approach. And I would say that this approach begins with Saul Friedländer and his concept of integrated history. So the attempt to include all perspectives and to analyze all the documents which are available. And this is very much present in Omar's book about Buchach. So he analyzed how the Germans were involved in the Holocaust, how the Ukrainians were involved in the Holocaust, how the Jews behaved during the Holocaust, what the Poles were doing in the town during the Holocaust. And it started actually with Saul Friedländer and his concept of integrated history and his critique of the German-centered historiography. And the first person who did it in Germany was Franziska Bruder. She published her dissertation in 2007, and she was the first German historian working on the Holocaust in Ukraine who analyzed the survivor testimonies and the Jewish documents. And he knew in which way the Ukrainian nationalists were involved on the Holocaust, because this information are present in the testimonies. So to conclude, integrated history is very important for the study of the Holocaust in Ukraine and elsewhere. So the concept of Saul Friedländer, as presented by Omar Bartov in his study about Buchach, and I am obviously skeptical about the national approaches to the Holocaust, the German national approach or the Polish national approach. And what I would like to emphasize, it is what I have already said, is the number of 800,000 Jews who were killed in Western Ukraine, in Eastern Galicia and in Volhynia, and the role of the Ukrainians, of the Ukrainian nationalists and the ordinary Ukrainians, and to say that they were involved in the killing of 800,000 Jews. So they were not, they did not only kill 2 or 3%, as Ukrainian and German apologists say, but the Ukrainians were involved in the killing of 800,000 Jews in Ukraine. Obviously, it were the Germans who were conducting the Holocaust, by the Ukrainian nationalists were involved in the killing of this number of people. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you really for a very well-built lecture, and the way you led us from the first part to the second part to each group. It was fascinating to hear about the way each group of historians wrote about themselves. Okay, each one sees his own problems, his own troubles. And I was also struck by the use of your expression, ordinary Ukrainians, following Browning in a way, ordinary men. If there is something like ordinary Ukrainians, if we follow Omer Bartov and yourself, saying that they were involved, these ordinary were highly involved and not ordinary bystanders. So thank you really. Thank you for keeping the time.